German pilots were tasked with a near impossible effort to stop the Allied strategic bombing campaign during World War II. The German Air Force's successes in the summer of 1944 and on was a fraction of its successes from the summer of 1943. Air Force pilot cadets were Germany's cream of the crop, yet by summer of 1944 they faced a toll on operations due to lack of fuel, outnumbered by Allied planes by a factor of 6 to 1, suspension of all training flights, experienced pilot attrition, and the fly till you die tour of duty policy. The intent of this video is to review post-D-Day German pilot flying conditions, challenges, and hardships. In this 1945 post-war interrogation, Goering was asked about Germany's Air Force manpower recruitment policy. The German Air Force had top priority in personnel selection, U-boat crews selection second, and panzers third. The best of Germany's youth came into the Air Force. Only the Waffen-SS held back candidates. The German Air Force could poach from any other organization. This chart from a British bombing report shows Western Front German Air Force planes in inventory. The type of plane is represented by the legend. Single-engine day fighters are represented by this area. Jet fighters in this sliver of area. The number of planes delivered increased in 1944 due to Armaments Production Minister Albert Speer's effort in fighter production priority and the dispersal of aircraft factories. So, the German Air Force was staffed with the best men and had more planes in 1944 than in any of the previous years. Those were about the only two German Air Force bright spots. Some of the fighter pilots' flying conditions and hardships are listed on this page from a January 1945 declassified Air Intelligence Weekly Summary document. JG-4's fighter pilots are to remain at their base 7 days a week. No dancing or visitors are allowed. Pilots are to be on constant alert to sortie if needed. All leave passes have been canceled. Pilots are expected to fly until you are killed, injured, or become a POW. When not attacking bombers, which is their primary mission, they are sent to attack Allied fighter bombers and/or strafe Allied ground targets. This table lists the RAF tour duty requirements from a November 1944 Air Ministry document. RAF fighter pilots needed to complete 200 hours of sortie flight time. U.S. fighter pilots flying in the ETO needed to complete 300 hours of operational flight time. The ETO heavy bomber crew tour duty at war's end equated to 35 missions. The German pilot tour duty is characterized as a fly till you die policy. Big changes in Allied bomber threats came in June 1944, the month of D-Day, which will be explained using this chart representing the 8th Air Force heavy bomber monthly attrition rate from fighters. The data was plotted from these sources. Bomber losses prior to June of 1944 were mainly from fighters. Bomber losses after June 1944 were mainly from flak. Around the same time, losses from fighters also dropped from around 3% to 0.3%. This reduction in German fighter effectiveness was mainly due to the payoff of the previous 6 months combined bomber offensive point-blank directive, where the priority of the RAF and USAAF was the destruction of the German Air Force in preparation for the D-Day landings. It succeeded. The German Air Force was also experiencing the downstream effects of the aviation fuel reductions from the bombing of the synthetic oil production plants, as listed on this map showing the sources of Germany's oil production facilities as of April 1944. The synthetic oil plants are the solid triangles. The channel deep dived this topic in this video, and the key points will be summarized. 97% of Germany's aviation fuel is produced in 25 hydrogenation plants, which turn coal into aviation fuel. The bombing started in May 1944. 263 total bombing raids were conducted by the USAAF and RAF until war's end. Bombing reduced aviation fuel output by 97% by March of 1945. The consequences of the aviation fuel shortage included no training sorties, virtually stopped all bombing missions, only conduct missions in favorable weather, and if there is a likelihood of success or the bombers are attacking oil facilities. This chart shows a comparison of training hours of the German RAF and U.S. pilots. Where the RAF and U.S. pilot training hours remained constant or increased, German pilot training hours decreased. By mid-1944, German pilot training hours had been reduced by half from the war's start hours. This was a direct result from the lack of fuel. A German POW pilot expressed his candid thoughts on the shortcomings of the German Air Force from a November 1944 Air Intelligence document. Air Force plane supply is adequate, but the supply of pilots is extremely serious. Other POWs have indicated the German Air Force has expanded their flight training schools to increase pilot supply. However, experienced pilots and officers are not easily replaced. The decline in Germany's fighter combat effectiveness is due to the lack of pilot experience, as discussed in this April 1945 Air Intelligence Weekly Summary document. Although there is an adequate supply of planes, there are no pilots to man them. This failure is due to the fuel shortage and raids on training fields. Much of the overall experience loss is due to shooting down of their best pilots. Once the point-blank initiative to destroy the German means of airplane production and long-range fighter escorts were unleashed, the losses of experienced pilots multiplied. The attrition of experienced pilots became a cycle. The more planes shot down, the overall experience of the pilot corps dropped, which made them easier to shoot down. It is likely the Air Force consists entirely of new recruits with minimal combat experience. Of the captured German pilots shot down in November and December 1944, 70% had fewer than 10 missions to their credit. By June 1944, Germany had 1,700 planes positioned along the Western Front from this July 1944 Air Intelligence Report. We can see the distribution of these planes in this chart. This is in contrast to the 11,000 Allied planes. By D-Day, the German Air Force was outnumbered 6.5 to 1 on the Western Front. This overwhelming supply of Allied planes can be vividly seen in this 8th Air Force case study engagement between a P-51 Mustang and an Me-262 jet that occurred in November 1944 from a January 1945 Air Intelligence report. The P-51 engaged with the Me-262 jet fighter and shot out its right engine. It went into a flat spin and the pilot bailed out. While the unmanned jet was descending in a flat spin, around 16 P-51 Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts took potshots at it. It did not catch fire. This would be quite a visual. I asked the Google AI tool to create an image of a flat spinning Me-262 under attack by 8 Mustangs and 8 P-47s. This was the result. For some reason, the AI tool added a nose engine and propeller to the Me-262. A captured German flak soldiers unit had 3 rules. If the plane's finish is silver, it's American, dark finish British, and invisible German. By war's end, the German Air Force had ceased to exist as a fighting force. Field Marshal Grime, Goering's successor, was quoted as saying just prior to taking his own life, "I'm head of the German Air Force, but I have no Air Force." A German interrogator asked a British POW, "What do you think of the German Air Force?" This question was not asked again as the POW answered, "I don't know. I've been in Italy for 7 months and I've never seen a German plane." By the start of April 1945, the German Army and Air Force were on the verge of collapse from this April 8, 1945 intelligence report. The Air Force Chief of Staff was killed during Hitler's assassination plot. Milch is in hiding. Goering is holed up in his castle wearing fancy silk uniforms. They will likely offer resistance to the very end. The fascist political party placed loyalists in key positions. In summary, the German Air Force pilots faced challenges and hardships from June 1944 and on. This included base hardships, no dancing, no passes, no visitors, pilot attrition, loss of experienced pilots. Pilot training pipeline was insufficient in matching plane production, unlimited tour of duty flights, lack of aviation fuel, no training fuel, limited sorties, outnumbered opponent at 6.5 to 1. By April 1945, the German Air Force was on the verge of collapse. If you found this German pilot challenges and hardships discussion review informative, please consider commenting, liking, and or subscribing to the channel World War II U.S. Bombers.